We'll take a roll call. Let's start with Director Hasty.
Yes.
Director Bradford.
Yes.
Director Fuhrer.
Yes.
Director Fletcher.
Yes.
Director Blazer.
Yes.
Director Vasquez.
Yes.
And Director Matthews.
Yes.
All members present in the room.
Okay. I'll lead the Pledge of Allegiance and salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Public comment. Do we have any public comment today? Charlie, are you?
I have one, Mr. Chair. Is this Charles Sharp? Was this for public comment or for an item on the agenda? Very good. So, Charles Sharp.
Okay, Charles Sharp. And you're from where? All right.
Thank you. Good morning, Charles Sharp, Oregon House. My comments are about the redistricting, but also touch on some other areas. So when Yuba County Water Agency was formed by an act of the state legislature in 1959, the 5 county supervisors were designated as the directors. Around 1990, Director Matthews thought it might be better to be able to represent the people if there were 2 more positions. Thus, he persuaded the then directors to petition the legislature for 2 additional directors, and the state agreed. I think that's the correct history. Director Hasty has a seat on this board, courtesy of Director Matthews.
Charles, wait.
It's public comment, Brent.
It's public comment.
Public comment, Brent.
It's the correct
Point of order.
Well, no, I'm sorry. It was if you
All
were.
right. This is not, this is
Okay.
one-way conversation.
Well, anyway, the 2 additional directors were established, and they're here, right? That's a valid statement. Okay, let's just leave it at that then. Director Matthews has also suggested a committee of local officials and perhaps others to be established to provide recommendations to the board on grant funding requests. This would provide input independent of the Yuba Water Agency staff. This would mean the agency might be giving up its authority over the grant funding process. So far, the agency has chosen not to move forward on this suggestion. Perhaps this will change soon. For the Yuba Water Agency to better serve the people of Yuba County in making grants, might it not be good to incorporate input from a broader range of community leaders? Thank you for your time.
Okay. Public comments on one-way conversation. All right. Approval of consent items. The board may take, I'll let you.
Motion to approve.
We have a first, need a second?
I will second.
Seth will second.
Through the chair, I have one proposed change on the minutes from the last meeting. There was a motion to approve all of the grant requests that was unsuccessful. I believe I voted in favor of that particular request. So
That is correct, Mr. Chair. I had that correction as well.
Okay.
So thank you, Director
All right.
Bradford.
Thank you very much. All right. We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
We can do a roll call, sure. Let's start with Director Hasty.
Yes.
Director Matthews.
Yes.
Director Bradford.
yes.
Director Blazer.
Yes.
Director Fuhrer.
Yes.
Director Fletcher.
Yes.
Director Vasquez.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Public hearing, 9 o'clock. Receive public and board member input on proposed maps to adjust the boundaries of north and south director divisions.
All right, different hat. Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. Jim Attrition, I'm the clerk of the board. Let me add some more folks to this. I'm going to share my screen. So you'll recall on October 5th, we brought an item to you to give an overview and presentation for the division director boundaries for the north and south divisions. Today, we're bringing this item for public input and board member input pursuant to Elections Code 22001, which requires at least one public hearing prior to the board's consideration of a final map adoption. So today, in your packets and online, you saw the 4 proposed maps. I also have copies of the current map as well as the 4 proposed maps in the room. They're online, and I do want to share with you today an online tool that the county has assisted us with in preparing the maps, as well as the online tool that folks can go in and zoom in and look at more detail if they so choose. This is really for your benefit and the public's benefit to provide us with input for any changes or considerations for the maps going forward. We do anticipate, actually, we will be bringing this back on December 7th for consideration of final adoption. So if there's no questions to start, I'll share my screen and have a look at the maps. Fair? Okay. So I want to start this by saying, giving my thanks to Katie Atkinson. She's the county GIS analyst you're probably all familiar with. She was instrumental in making these maps happen, as well as this GIS sample here. So for your benefit, I think you're all seeing that. The link to this page will be posted on our website along with the maps and everything. We'll be able to see it there. We'll also put out some public announcements so they can tap into it from our social media pages. Along the left-hand menu bar, you'll see the 4 options. There are options 1, 2, 3, and 4. The checkboxes that are already there, you can uncheck those. It removes the committees and labels and things like that. We have them default to be on. When we choose option number 1, for example, you can see the highlights. North District is in blue. The South District as proposed is in green, kind of green. And we can zoom in. And for example, the Linda area is probably the most populous in this particular area that is at the border area. And we can zoom in as far as you need to. So if you want me to go into more detail, I certainly can.
Anybody need more detail from
Zoom out. I can, just a quick switch. You can turn off number 1 and number 2 turns on. Slight variation. And the focus area is Linda there. Move option 2. We look at option 3. That proposes to leave the Yale Air Force Base, which has a community boundary in the Southern District as it is now. And number 4. Option number 4 is very similar to the current map. The changes primarily is in the Linda area. It covers just about that entire area. Goes to the North District.
Can you scan down? How close is the line up in this Marysville area? Is that following the river?
It almost exactly follows the river, I think. Yeah,
So it's
it
kind of
does.
what the original plan was, and that was literally the split when this first started. So I was just trying to figure
Pull your map down, Director, or your microphone down, Director.
I'm sorry.
Folks online.
I just wanted to make, it's just, I wanted to see if it followed the river because that's kind of the original, that's when it was first built, it followed the river. So I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, the original lines was the river when the agency was established.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any input from the board? Charlie? I was going to start up that way. Charlie?
I didn't hear you.
Any comments?
Oh, I guess I represent mostly rural area other than the city of Marysville in the original idea. And maps 1 and 2 give me most rural areas, keeps Linda, Olivehurst, Plymouth Lake, and the city of Wheatland in Brent's district. When we had a meeting with Brent, he wanted to include Beale Air Force Base in his area, but Beale Air Force Base doesn't have much of a population, so when you put it in or out, it doesn't affect it much. But I guess the intent I would hope that the board would consider is I keep the city of Marysville, obviously, and the rural area, and we maps 1 and 2, or A and B, give me rural area and a good part of Linda to Brent, where maps 3 and 4, I take a lot more of Linda, and I'm not sure that the best representation for Linda is the same reputation as Plumas Lake, Olivehurst, and Wheatland, since they were fit together. So I guess I would urge the board to think in the area of keeping the rural together and the population together. That's just my take on the situation.
Okay. Don?
A couple of questions. How much of a difference in population are we talking about here after the census?
That's a good question. Let me,
I believe the map show
the maps
40,000
that are in your package show the
each
actual
of these.
breakdown. And so 40,000 roughly in population, 41,000 if you're looking for that. If you want the variance for each of the proposed maps, I can get that for you.
Okay, so the north needs to gain population
In essence,
to
correct.
balance it out,
Correct.
but I didn't know how much of a gain they had. If it,
I
Oh,
believe
that's a good question.
all
Yeah.
four maps are almost identical
They are.
in population at
Right.
50-50.
Yeah, if you're looking for just the amount that the North District would be gaining in population, it would vary by each of the maps. We didn't contemplate it by that. We're looking at the total number of population and where that line should split based on two divisions.
Through the chair, can I ask a quick
Population.
question to clarify? This is a question I ask Jim, and I think it's in the heart of a clerk recorder, county clerk recorder, not to want to do it. But one of the things I ask early on is you can allow a 10% variation. And if you look at the growth pattern in the South, one of the things I recommended is you add, the North should get 7% more just because we're going to balance out in the next year or two. And I know that's really hard for a clerk to get through his cart because you got to get the 50-50, but it's clear the subdivision growth in Plumas Lake and Linda, it's going to not take very long to get past that 10%. And so that's all but he balanced them out almost perfectly. I'm impressed that you got to that point, but it was really, but I really do feel like at some point that's going to be so fast in the South that you're going to overtake that number. That I wondered about building it 5 to 7% more. But
they don't allow us to
I
do
don't
that
think they,
they don't allow us to do it based on projections. We have to go strictly by the census, right?
Correct.
so,
Correct.
So all four maps are
Just
identical.
to give you an indication on the maps on your screen now, I shared map 1, just an example, as an example. Division 1 and Division 2, 40,001, there's a variance of 21.
Yeah, it's 42.
That's pretty close.
Yeah.
So that's, again, extension of thanks to Katie Atkinson. She narrowed them down even farther than I did, which is more impressive.
so
I think
Don,
one's a 5, is a variance of 5 voters. 5 people.
Don, what do you think? What's your choice out of the four?
I don't know.
You have time to consider.
Flip a coin, give me a
Debating.
clue. You're gonna,
Where is Beale
Freshman.
actually counted as population?
Correct. It considers the county's population, all the population within the border.
Including
Where it is, not so much. We're just trying to divvy it. And then that's why you have 4 options before you. It's up to the board to decide where they want those boundary or that boundary to be.
Yeah,
Sure.
are you gonna,
generally, it seems like north-south, obviously, but that the line is just gonna move to the south somewhat.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know how much difference that really makes.
pick a number?
Pick a number. Let me get back to you.
Our fine art of
Are we-
procrastination.
are we-
Go ahead,
We're not
Seth.
making the
Go ahead,
decision
Seth.
We're
today.
not making the decision today.
Can
I
I
understand.
clarify with Brent? So if I understood Brent correctly, he's saying that instead of it being 40-40, it could be 41-39 because we're allowed to have one district be 10% higher.
I actually thought the numbers you have to change the law. I mean, we have to move it because we're out of the 10% compliance.
But he could move it to 42-38 is what I think I'm hearing him say. Is that accurate?
What I understand from this process, that the courts would tolerate up to 10% variance. I presume that's based on history. that
So
they've
pick one.
had.
Well, so I think his point is that so he would like to see, instead of it being a 40-40 split, he would like to see a possible projection where we had a 42-38 split is what I think he's asking for. If that's within acceptable limits.
Okay, so you're definite maybe.
And then I would defer, of course, to Matthews and Hasty because I think those are the ones that are going to be most involved. So
Okay.
I support their choice.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, I think four's, yeah.
Get him a mic.
Yes, sir. You
Thank
don't
you.
have to pick one.
Yeah, I just want to chime in on that answer because it's a bit of an apples and oranges on the 10%. The 10% is relevant for some of the constitutional equal protection issues what the courts are willing to recognize. The statute that you're operating under, though, is a little narrower, and it reads, after each federal decennial census and using the census as a basis, the board shall adjust the boundaries of the divisions so the divisions are, as far as practicable, equal in population. So that standard's
Okay.
a little tighter, and you can certainly get a lot closer than that's.
That's fine. I just didn't, I was looking at the 10% thinking, but that's, thank you. That clarifies. I'm good with it.
Randy?
Through the chair. So, I don't know if it's coming on or not. Are we there? I've got my light on. I'm not sure it's working, but is it testing 1, 2?
We can hear you, Randy.
Can you hear out there?
Apparently she can. Yeah.
Okay.
You can hear
So,
it.
just to let my concept on these four map number 4 really makes the most sense to me because from the public's point of view, it's still north-south. And I think that was the intent originally. When you start going into the depth of each of the communities, I think that's a mistake. Number 4 clearly has the line very similar to what's been used to. We'll see what it looks like in 10 years from now, but for the next 10, that's the clear choice in my mind.
Okay. So we have we have 2 4s and 2 maybes. Here.
So just to add something else kind of interesting to the mix for the board to consider as we make this decision, I shared these maps on my supervisor Facebook page, and I did receive an interesting public comment. And this individual suggested that irrigation districts, we try not to split communities, but given the role of the water agency, they suggested that we might not want to split irrigation districts and keep them solely within the boundary of a particular director's district. And map 1 does that, and map 4 for the most part does that. I did look at the map of the irrigation districts, and there's a little bit of Brophy that extends into the North District on map 4, but it's just a tiny little bit north of Hamilton Smartsville Road. Anyway, so I share that. I certainly understand Director Matthews' desire to represent, really keep the focus on Marysville and the rural parts of the county. But I'm not sure how you get to the population that you need to in that district without including all or at least a significant portion of East Linda. And so I don't really know a way around that. And so, I think I like map 4 the best because it really does kind of have not only a north-south, which I think they all have, but it for the most part does keep the community of Linda kind of whole. And so I think it's a clear division that's easy for the public to see and understand. And so that's really why I like that one, but I'm certainly not opposed to, one that's mixed in Linda. And, I know Brent's expressed an interest to have Beale. Doesn't have a lot of population difference. You could certainly add that into one of the other, to maps 1 or 2 and not probably change the population balance very much. But if you do that, I'm still not sure you get to where Director Matthew wants to be because he'd still have portions of Linda. So anyway, that's kind of all over the board. But anyway, that's my input.
Okay. Well, that's a vote for 4 and Brent.
Through the chair. Yeah. So it's the first meeting we had. The only thing I ask is I think the South County should represent Beale. I think from an economic development, it's where the Beale is. It's more, and we're working with Beale. And so that's the only thing I really care about in the map. I would like to have Beale, and that's was the first statement I said, and that's what I said to Charlie at the time. Barring that, it just doesn't matter to me much. Looking at the maps, I think that I like 4 well, I do like 4, so I would say I'm a go for 4. But I think that one of the challenges is I appreciate that the rural areas have a different need. But the reality for you, especially you who live in Linda, having somebody who having 2 of the members represent Linda is not a bad thing. From the standpoint of Linda already takes the sewer from Marysville, so it's not like they're not connected. We have to represent the entire county. I don't get to represent just the farm guys. I have to represent everybody in this community. So I represent the urban and the rural. And I think that's important that both of us who have such big districts are able to represent both. Because the reality for Yuba County is I think to the north will always be more rural, but the reality for us is we're becoming more urban every day, and we're growing faster than almost any county. So you can't forever go, I don't want to have more urbans in my area. You got to support them both. And so I lean toward 4, partly because I think as born and raised in Linda, I personally think having 2 representatives represent my area is a better thing than just having 1. And so I lean toward 4, and I would ask the board to support map 4 when we get to the, after this public hearing is over and we move to that meeting. So that's my reasoning for wanting map 4. And I also, as I said, I asked and requested, I would like to have Beal within my district.
Okay, well, that's a 4 for Brent. I think that at one point in time, Yuba County was the largest growing county in California. I think we're going to achieve that this year because of all the building and all the changes that happened to the fees and all that. So, but I think number 4 is definitely the way to go.
Through the chair.
Yes.
This was helpful for me to hear all this discussion. And so I agree with most of you. It just seems logical, more logical to go with number 4 in my mind at this point.
I think we have a good board in that we stop and look back and say what's right for Yuba County, not so much what's right for any of us. So do we open the public hearing? Okay, all right. Now, public, who would like to, well, Charles, who besides Charles?
Through the chair.
Yes, sir.
I understand the discussion on 4. I go back originally at 1 and 2. When you talk, I thought Brent said, or not Brent, it was said that the irrigation districts are represented right now by 2.
Map 1 and map 4, he said.
Yeah, and then map 1, I represent almost all of the districts except South Yuba, and I represent most of Brophy. When you go to 4, I represent basically none of the South districts. So if you're trying to balance the 8 irrigation districts, maps 1 and 2 do it better to keep them together. Obviously, my representation is key to Linda because I need people. So if I take Linda and give up the rest of the South County, I'm splitting Linda, I guess between Linda and Olivehurst are no longer under the same person, but I understand that if Linda has both of us representing them, plus the supervisor, that that might be the feeling of the board. I would just urge you, we don't have to make the decision today, but it's supposed to be at the next meeting, that when you go to 4, you're keeping the north-south of the river, that you're giving me a major population in the south that I really don't feel connected with. And I think the north director is agricultural, would fit the water districts, and only have the city of Marysville and a small slice of it. So I would urge you at the next meeting to consider that thought also.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlie.
Jim,
Seth?
is it possible to Is it possible to have, when you come back for the next meeting, maps, just, we'll narrow it down to maps 1 and 4 at this point, it sounds like. And in both of them have bill or force space belong to the south, but then maps 1 and 4 for us to review, or we have to.
I think it's appropriate for all 4 to remain in the public's perspective, just so
Okay.
if in case we receive any public input between now and December 7th, and they'll still be available for the board to contemplate.
Okay.
So through the chair, maybe doing something similar to what we did for the Board of Supervisors is we directed staff that we were presented with 2 options. We directed staff to create a 3rd option that was a result of kind of the discussion. Again, it did not remove the other options from discussion, from being options. It just added one to it with all the feedback. And so kind of along the lines of what Director Fuhr said, if we were to take that approach, then potentially, you know, creating a 1A, for example, that looked a lot like map 1, but had Beale in the south, and then made, you know, any necessary changes maybe in the Linda area to balance that population. So I don't know if that would, you know, satisfy kind of what everyone is looking for or not, but.
I would concur with that very much.
Well, as being the supervisor for Linda, I think map 4 works well with all of Linda. We've been pretty much cut up all over the place, and that's about as close to where we are right now.
The 1A would
Yeah.
put Beale in his district. Beale has so little population.
But
Would
Beale's
be
going to
much more
become
limited
a
also.
big player in the growth of, in the next 4 years. So, okay. Any further discussion? All right, Charlie. Thirty seconds, 3 minutes.
Thank you. It's Charles, please. He's Charlie. I'm Charles. Thank you. Originally, the dividing line was north-south of the Yuba River. The changing demographics have rather distorted this line, as we can see from the maps. But the original concept, you know, going back to that, what were you trying to, what was being trying to accomplish, and what was the board trying to, who were they trying to represent from the original idea to have the 2 additional directors? And I think you need to go back to that concept and say, why is that what was wanted at that time? And how are we going to stray from that or try to keep in that area? And I don't know the answer. I'm just pointing out some questions about it. So thank you.
Through the chair, can I comment now? And I'll kind of help you with that.
Okay.
We're going to bring it back to the board. Okay.
Thank you. So Charles, here's the story that I think you're kind of missing on this. I will absolutely give Director Matthews credit for me being on this board, because without his support and when the agency was formed, he was around and we wouldn't have an agency. So 100% support of that statement, but it has to do with when the agency was formed. When what you're talking about, when they added 2 members were split, prior to having it elected, there were two members that were added, and Charlie knows better what year that was, but they were member units or they were water district members. So we weren't elected. There were 2 extra members, and Charlie served on the board as Costa was director or member, I believe, as a water member person. You had to be on a water board in the county. One was north of the river and one was south. And then in the 90s, there was a request by the public that we have this member elected north and south of the river. And the member units, and Charlie at that time, were adamantly opposed because they believe, rightfully, right or wrong, that electing us to the board, and I heard him say it many times, they'd just be giving a retirement job to former supervisors. And so he was not in favor of this public election north and south. He wanted to keep, and again, I'm not arguing whether it was right or wrong, keeping water members on the board, and the voters voted for having an election north and south. The north and south was strictly because at that time that was where the numbers were, that was where the even split was, and now that's changed.
Okay, well, thanks for the clarification. Sure. I mean, this history of the agency is kind of hard to come by sometimes. It's not really well organized, and
When you see the video, you'll know it all.
right, you help fill that in because you were there, but it's kind of like not anywhere you can go and see what actually happened. But I do remember something about the 2 districts being on it, and the voters decided they wanted more say.
Right.
Is that what really happened? Well, thanks for the clarification.
All right.
Through the chair,
Thank you.
could I
Wait a minute.
make a few clarifications?
All right,
Major
You're done.
clarifications.
you're done.
First off, when the Agency Act started, we had what we called an advisory council. And the advisory council, I believe, was made up with 2 votes from Marysville, which later became only 1 vote. A vote for OPUD, a vote for Linda, a vote for Wheatland, a vote for the USDA conservation, and all the water districts, which included North Yuba. And any member on the advisory council could run. When we came in the 77 drought, a fellow named of Mr. Cratter had just bought the gold fields. And in order to sell water out of the gold fields, he had to make a finding that the water in the gold fields wasn't connected to the Yuba River. And the Board of Supervisors had to also go along, and by a 3 to 2 vote, the Board of Supervisors said, yes, he can sell the water south. And that started a huge controversy, and that gave us the momentum to add 2 people from the advisory council to serve 2-year terms and be elected every other year. But it wasn't an irrigation district proposal. The advisory council was made of all the entities in the county, and it came about because of that. Then in the late 80s, Dower and I can't remember the other, came with the idea, let's dissolve the advisory council. And there was something in the original law that said the agency couldn't increase their salary without a vote of the advisory council. So the vote they put up to the people wasn't to eliminate the 2 spots or to elect them publicly. They just dissolved the advisory council. So when they dissolved the advisory council, then that left the water agency with the task of finding a different way to vote on the 2 districts. So it was set up as a check and balance, and not the check and balance being from the water districts, being from the advisory council. I'm still a firm believer, as Mr. Sharp said, I didn't know he is that we still need an advisory council, and the advisory council, I believe, should be made up of all the public entities in the district or in the county to have advice to give us. And especially when we're giving out money, we represent different entities, but we don't get input from the other elected people in the county. And I think other elected people in the county need a voice, and that's what it used to be in Brent and mine. But when you went to a... I'm coming for you.
Can you shut the fuck up? Holy shit. Didi, you look so fucking hot. Just let me see your tits. Come on. Hello? Dad, what the fuck are you looking at?
Thumbs up, you can hear me okay? Thank you, sir.
Huh?
I think we're good. Great.
Think we're good?
Nice.
Mary, we had a break-in on our Zoom meeting, so just thought I'd give you a heads up. It seems that he's gone.
Yeah.
But we need to not have the comments.
Mr. Chair, want to make sure there's no other public comment from online. I don't see any hands. And with that, we should close the public hearings.
Okay.
I'll move
We're
we
gonna
close public
the
hearing.
Public hearing. All right. Public hearing is closed.
Great.
All right. Receive public and board, let's see, to consider the adoption of the final map we held at a public meeting at the regular meeting of the Board of Directors, December 7th. Let's go to item number 8, receive a presentation regarding a broadband master plan effort by Yuba County. Well, it's not as bad as some of the break-ins we had.
No, it's.
Yeah. I think we're okay, Mary. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Jackie Silman, Community Impact Specialist for Yuba Water Agency. So this morning, we've invited Ian Scott, who is the Broadband Program Manager for the county, to update our board on the Broadband Master Plan. So we do realize that the members of the Board of Supervisors heard a presentation recently on this subject. We wanted Ian to update the Yuba Water Board for several reasons. First, broadband infrastructure is a critical component in the economic strategic plan for the Yuba County. In fact, broadband was rated by our economic development consultants as one of the top rated projects to be completed as an economic development catalyst. So enhanced broadband infrastructure would also greatly enhance communications throughout the county during emergencies such as flood emergencies. So finally, Yuba Water Agency funded the development of the Broadband Master Plan. And so as a catalyst in planning needed infrastructure, the actual project of expanding broadband is a county project, but we thought that since you funded it, you deserve to hear Ian speak about it. So with that, let me turn it over to Ian Scott, Broadband Program Manager for Yuba County.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Jackie. Good morning, Chair Vasquez and fellow Yuba Water Agency directors. My name is Ian Scott. I am the Broadband Project Manager for Yuba County. I'd like to start by thanking your board for being the catalyst to get the broadband project off the ground, including, as Jackie said, funding the Broadband Master Plan. Your leadership of the broadband project has produced this plan. As a programmatic note, this presentation will cover the core of the content presented at the 1026 Board of Supervisors meeting. Now let's discuss some common issues around broadband. Chief among them is that broadband is expensive. Depending on deployment type, middle mile broadband can cost for aerial fiber from $21,614 to $66,460 per mile. And for underground fiber deployment, anywhere from $98,760 to $392,000 per mile. With the main difference between these being that aerial underground fiber is vulnerable to wildfires, similar to the way that power lines are run, whereas underground fiber requires trenching, usually along the right-of-way of a road. The cost range for underground fiber deployment has to do with soil and rock composition, tree coverage, and other factors. Deployment of broadband is currently unclear. Data from the California Public Utility Commission is reported by the ISPs, which is less reliable than if collected by a subscriber household. ISPs are not required to share the locations of their middle mile infrastructure, and we are seeking to address this as part of our next broadband strategic plan in which we will provide conceptual network designs. From the broadband master plan, we know that at least 32.1% of households are unserved at the standard of 6 download, 1 upload megabytes per second. 34.5% of households are unserved at 10.1. 47.9% are unserved at 25.3 megabytes per second. And as CPUC data is reported by the ISPs, these estimates are likely higher than those that have been reported. Validating broadband availability will require household outreach and the use of tools such as CalSpeed, which is a California Public Utility Commission tool that enables households and businesses to test their actual broadband service being delivered. This data is used by the California Public Utility Commission to true up or audit the ISP reported data and may make areas that wouldn't otherwise be eligible for federal grants eligible. From the Broadband Master Plan, we have the following on residential broadband adoption, which according to the CPUC data, only 20 to 40% of households north of Highway 20 have a reliable 6.1 megabytes per second connection. We do have the following cost estimates from the Broadband Master Plan. A few notes on these. These estimates will be compared with the Broadband Strategic Plan. They do not constitute a conceptual network design. It is also likely that a combination of state and federal grants, along with private sector investment, will contribute to these investments needed to get our households and business communities connected. Practically, it would seem much more likely for the selected broadband deployment strategy to be closer to 50% fiber, 50% wireless scenarios listed in this slide. Additionally, since the 10/26 Board of Supervisors meeting, the business deployment estimates have been disputed, which will inform our scrutiny of the next broadband strategic plan. Specifically, the amount of parcels counted as a business use in the agricultural areas. Our next steps, of course, are policy-based. They comprise, among them, a dig once, dig smart policy in which we would promote the placement of fiber and conduit anytime work occurs in the public right-of-way. How this would look is anytime public right-of-way is disturbed for a project, I would coordinate with a third-party middle-mile fiber installer to place either middle-mile fiber or, if cost prohibitive, conduit to run future middle-mile fiber. As much of the cost of installing fiber is entrenching, it is anticipated that this policy will help keep costs under control. We would also offer a master license agreement policy, which provides an objective standard for ISP co-location on Yuba County assets. Examples of these county assets are facilities, communications towers, streetlights, and traffic signals. Leasing space to ISPs will also contribute funds to Yuba County to be used at Board of Supervisors' discretion. Public-private partnerships are the model that philosophically we would recommend. In this case, there are some other jurisdictions that have different models, but what this would look like is partnerships with ISPs for shovel-ready broadband projects and third-party middle-mile providers. Some of the state and federal grants require the county to act as the lead agency with ISPs or third-party middle-mile providers. And on broadband project streamlining, this would entail an overhaul of existing permit fees around broadband and streamlining the environmental review process. Specifically, a broadband master environmental impact report would save project applicants sums of time and money, making the regulatory climate in the county much more friendly to investment. We are also anticipating in the second quarter of 2022 an update on a broadband strategic plan, which would be providing conceptual network designs. We'll also be using the strategic plan to evaluate the cost estimates found in the Broadband Master Plan. We expect the numbers that result from the strategic plan to be significantly more accurate than those as presently known. At the current time, we intend to monitor the state and federal grants landscape, awaiting grant opportunities for the expansion of broadband networks. I will be returning before your board of directors periodically to provide updates on the progress of our broadband project. For now, I thank your board for your leadership in prioritizing broadband policy and for the funds that made the broadband master plan possible. And I thank you all very much for your time. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the board?
Through the chair. I'm not sure this mic is working, but how often would you anticipate coming back in front of the board, Ian?
At the board's pleasure.
So let me propose to you that at least quarterly, keep us up to date. In addition, of course, you'll be talking with the Board of Supervisors, but your role over the next 10 years, as we've talked, is critical to our infrastructure and the future of Yuba County. So absolutely keep us informed. Let us know what's going on. Give us that snapshot. I appreciate you being here and providing that information. So keep it up. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Fletcher.
Yeah, through the chair, could you uplight us, Washington and their, whatever they're voting on, it has a big broadband pile of money. How do you access that?
Yes, this is a great question, Director Matthews. My understanding is that such a bill as you were referring to has recently been signed, and it has something like $64 billion for broadband programs. I will be looking through that the grant opportunities that result from that legislation, and as soon as I hear more about that, I would be happy to update the board of directors.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Okay.
I'm
Go ahead.
super excited. I'm thrilled this is happening. I mean, I think that, you know, as somebody who started a business and now runs it totally, I mean, I can't even run a storage unit without having my internet on, which is, so I'm very, very excited this is happening. And I know I say this all the time, but I was up in Pinedale a month ago and they were putting in their fiber and connect in town. So you got a 2,000 person town in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, who's putting in their fiber network throughout the town right now. And I'm like, let's go Yuba County, catch up with that little town in Wyoming. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hasty.
Any further comments from the board? Well, I'd like to make one on 2009, 2010, 2011. I interviewed the vice president of Comcast. And Comcast has always had a $10 a month internet hookup for all the schools in Yuba County. And that's basically what's called low-hanging fruit. And I'd like to see them get involved with Comcast because we have something with very little cost and it's already in, rather than trying to completely redo the infrastructure in Yuba County itself as a whole. And I'd like to know what you would do if you had someone such as Comcast say, here, you can have a hookup for $10 a month.
Chair Vasquez, this is an excellent point. At this point, I think it would be advisable to develop that relationship with Comcast to address as much of that low-hanging fruit as possible to reduce the need for an investment in technology later.
Well, just it's my feeling that I'm with the government. I'm here to help you is the 9 most feared words in America and have been for centuries. I can get you the, in fact, that's what I'm looking for right now. And they would love to hear from you. The man's name is Philip Arnst. His phone number is 916-830-6796. And we asked the school to get involved with this. This is very simple for the school. They have forms. You pass them out to the kids. And if they have Comcast in their area, they can sign up for a $10 fee. And never made headway in 3 years. And I kind of gave up on that situation. But I really think it's something that maybe we as the government leaders can actually put something in place. And while we're all discussing about the billions of dollars that we're going to get from Washington, you're not going to live that long. We can get something done for change. So, Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions from the public?
Before you close up, in agriculture, you can't drive a tractor unless you can understand computers. The technology in the last 10 years has gone almost ballistic. But the county, I mean, we're out in rural, so I don't think it's practical where we're going to have fiber. But I see when you say 50% fiber and 50% wireless, I'm assuming you're talking like we happen to use SucceedNet. I see in your papers 10% of the county is hooked up with SucceedNet. So I would urge you to work with all of the providers and find out how you can interface to help them rather than start. I wasn't able to go through your whole 122 pages. I went through quite a few of them, and I would urge you to work with what we have also. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further comments from the board?
I think,
Okay, Don. Well,
we did have this conversation before, but I'm still hung up with the rapid advance of technology. And I'm kind of afraid that by the time we get this infrastructure done, that something similar to Starlink is going to be online and available to everybody. I can't get that out of my head. So how do you feel about that?
My philosophy on the need for the future investment is if the private sector can demonstrate a more effective course, then of course it would be my personal opinion for Yuba County to embrace that.
Yeah, they are making some progress. So we'll just see how it goes.
Okay. Any further comment from the board?
Through the chair. Don, I just want to say a perfect example of that back in the 90s was on the board in SACOG, and we were big on putting those yellow phones on the road every mile. And now they're just totally worthless because, I mean, everybody has a cell phone, but I don't think we can stop progress because we know technology is going to change, but we need to do what we can as we're doing it. And then if it goes away, that just means something better happened. And I'm okay with that.
I'm a firm believer if you wait until all the lights turn green before you get out of the garage, you ain't going nowhere. And that's what I've seen as far as Comcast came out here specifically to try and get Yuba County, actually Sutter County is also available for this, and no response at all. So, all right, Charlie, are we gonna go ahead and, yeah. Huh? I'm sorry.
In college, I studied engineering, electrical engineering, and one of my favorite classes was the microwave class. And I learned that microwaves go in a line of sight, like a flashlight. If you can see it, you can get it, but they don't go around corners very well. I would love to have a fiber optic in my house, but it's not very practical, and I can't afford it actually. But so broadband, line of sight broadband for the foothills is one of the best technologies available. And I get connections, and many people do, but many people can't because it's foothills and they're hills and dales and, you know, areas where the microwave can't see you. So at my house, I put up a 30-foot telephone pole so I could get over some neighbors' trees and see the antenna that Succeed.net had, and it works. So I've talked to your planning director, Kevin, about this a few times. Hire, and this is more toward the county than the Board of Agency, but anyway, you're all here. To hire a broadband engineer for the foothills, whose job is to go out and find areas where and help provide, consult to people and say, here's how we could get you a signal. You're in a hollow down here, we can put a pole here, we can do line of sight to get it down and work out on an individual level, people that can, groups or whatever, and help them in a very practical way to, get a signal. And that could be done today. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future of technology and all that, but this is a very practical way for the county to actually help people, get broadband connections, particularly in the foothills. It's not so important in the flatlands because you put a big antenna up and everybody can see it, or you run cables to people's houses and stuff. But the foothills, it's separate and it's much more difficult. And the broadband line of sight is really the best, one of the better technologies that works. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it. So, is there any further comment? Anything?
Nothing online, sir.
Okay, so we're going to 9. Receive an update regarding government relations and legislative activity.
Yeah, I'll take
Did
this
I miss
one.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Great,
along the lines of change, things have changed with our government relations and legislative affairs here internally at the agency. For many years, we relied on Rich Golb as our kind of our government affairs legislative consultant. Rich retired earlier this year. We, in our succession planning, we hired earlier this year Adam Robin to kind of take on that role internally here at the agency. And we've also been using Pilar for many years for our state advocacy, and we'll continue to use Pilar. But to kind of replace Rich's role in DC, Adam has also hired Jeff Bowman at Van Scoyoc and Associates. And so today, Adam will introduce our legislative update and introduce Pilar and Jeff. And this effort here is to basically educate the board on what's going on, what we've been doing, and to introduce you to the new team. So I'll kick it over to Adam and let him take it from here.
Thanks, William. Good morning, Chair Vasquez and directors. I'm Adam Robin, Government Relations Manager with Yuba-Water Agency. Very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and provide a little brief overview of some of our work related in the government relations space with a focus on some of our legislative engagement over the past year. As the board knows, we engage the state and federal government in a wide variety of settings for a wide variety of purposes, from working with resource agencies in partnership on habitat projects, for example, to engaging our regulatory agencies in a wide variety of settings, to, of course, engaging both state and federal legislature in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. In all of those settings, we're constantly working to advance Yuba-Water Agency's interests by identifying and pursuing opportunities, as well as by identifying and addressing risks or concerns at both the policy and budgetary levels. So today we're really pleased to have an opportunity to provide you with an update that's focused on that legislative engagement. We'll hear from our lobbyists in both Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and we'll have a chance to provide you with a brief preview of some issues that we see on the horizon in 2022 and beyond. Before we do that, though, I think it's worth just briefly reviewing our strategic priorities, the Water Agency's strategic priorities, and the important role that they play in providing staff with strategic direction as we engage in those various venues. The strategic priorities encompass the full scope of the agency's mission and responsibilities, from enhancing flood risk reduction to ensuring that our water supplies are reliable, to ensuring that we're doing what we can to catalyze economic development in a manner that's consistent with the agency's core mission. All of those priorities are captured in these strategic priorities that are established by the board through the strategic plan, and they really provide the roadmap that we use to guide ourselves through our engagement with state and federal governments. So with that, and with this reminder of our strategic priorities and the important role that they play in our efforts, I'd like to turn it over to our state and federal consultants, starting with Pilar Onate-Quintana, who's our representative in Sacramento.
So thank you so much for having me. It feels really, truly fantastic to start crawling out of the COVID cave and getting back out into the world. And I'm very, very happy to see all of you all. So I thought I would just start by just a little reminder as to where we are in the legislature in terms of the mix of legislators that we're currently dealing with. And, as you well know, you had a little conversation about redistricting here, and I know Adam will get more into redistricting, but these numbers could well change even further. But in any case, so in the Senate, we have 31 Democrats, 9 Republicans. We have there's some committees that we pay particular attention to, the Water Committee being one of them, of course. That continues to be chaired by Senator Henry Stern, who's from the LA area. Calabasas, Simi Valley, Malibu, et cetera. Republican Vice Chair being Senator Brian Jones, who's from the San Diego sort of East County area. And I point out that we're experiencing kind of an influx of newer staff, you know, with some of the old water geeks, as I affectionately call them, start to think about transitioning out of their roles in the legislature. In the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee, that includes Catherine Baxter. Then we have the Senate Budget Committee, which is obviously incredibly important. I'll get into even more how budget committees continue to be increasingly important in this environment, and that continues to be chaired by Senator Wachowski. On the Assembly side, we have 60 Democrats. There's one vacancy in San Francisco at the moment. One independent who used to be a Republican who flipped to independent in the last couple few years, and 19 Republicans. The Water Committee is chaired by Eduardo Garcia, who represents the Riverside and Imperial County areas, Vice Chair being Megan Dolly, Republican. And then we have a new chief consultant, or still relatively new, maybe about a year, Pablo Garza. On the Assembly Budget Subcommittee side, still chaired by Richard Bloom, but newer staff here again. And the reason I bring up newer staff is because, you know, we will need to continue to forge relationships and do outreach so these folks know who Yuba County is. And in my mind, to know Yuba County Water Agency is to love Yuba County Water Agency. So we do have our work cut out for us, particularly since the whole COVID shutdown really kind of hampered our efforts to get out there and sell ourselves to some of the newer folks who have come into the legislature. So popping back in terms of the year that was, just to kind of give you a sense overall about the state budget, and I know that you probably well recall the stories about the big buckets of money flowing into the state's coffers. Here's a little snapshot, this page and the next, on the state budget. So the point of this chart on the left, sort of greenish chart, is when I say state budget, I should say state budgets at this point, because the way the process currently rolls, or at least particularly this year with the infusion of funds and the early actions on fire and drought, there were kind of multiple waves of state budgets this year. For example, in the chart you can see March through May, the legislature passed $7 billion in early actions to address some of the drought and severe fire issues that the state is facing. And then come June 14th, the legislature passed what this chart calls an initial state budget. Why? To pass the test of, we passed the state budget so we can keep getting paid according to the initiative that was passed many years ago about a state budget needing to be passed by June 14th. However, then you will see June 28th, the legislature passes the budget package, which was kind of the real budget package, which was then subsequently signed by the governor. But wait, there's more that this chart doesn't encompass. On September 9th, the legislature passed a budget bill junior, and that was one day before the legislature shut down for session. And also in the waning days of the legislative session, the legislature passed a slew of policy-rich trailer bills. So the main point here is, again, not just a budget during this year, but also the continuingly increasing importance of the budget process from a policy standpoint, because these trailer bills don't go through the normal policy committee processes, but increasingly so, as has been over the last several years. You really need to pay attention to what's going on in the budget, because policy just is rife. In terms of how the budget allocated the $47 billion general fund surplus, you can see that most of it is categorized as one-time and temporary spending, and smaller chunks for ongoing spending, and then throwing some money at debt and liability and reserves. In terms of just kind of the big picture on what the budget really spent this year, you can see that there are obviously different ways to slice up this information. The general fund spending, being the sort of main fund of the state, actually decreased a little bit. but that was more than made up by other state funds and federal spending. Spending from all state funds would reach $263 billion in 21-22 compared to $202 billion in the 2020 Budget Act. And this last bullet speaks to the enormity of expenditures overall in terms of the just concluded July fiscal year. So the total spending, when you take the general fund, all state funds, and then the enormous amounts of federal money, the total spending was at $1.5 trillion at $513 billion. So now getting back to a world that we care specifically about, within all of that budgeting, there was a drought and resilience package totaling $4.6 billion, staged out over 3 years, including $3.3 billion for water and drought related activities, primarily from the general fund. $437 million of that was to respond to emergency drought conditions over the coming year, and will go for such things as state board oversight of regulatory restrictions on water diversions and fishing in certain streams, all sort of drought related. The largest funding allocation in this wave was $1.3 billion for the board to allocate grants for improvements in drinking and wastewater systems. And then you'll see that over the next 3 years, the legislature is looking to stage out and further program additional water expenditures. For example, $880 million in 22-23 is planned. And that's just based on last year. When we get into next year, we may be talking about more money. So one thing that we have been, and this is something that we're optimistic about for the next budget year, looking forward to 22-23. A little background here. So about 2-3 years ago, Yuba Water Agency really sort of broached and birthed and advanced the idea of the state really needing to prioritize what we call dam safety and climate resilience, kind of tied together, of course, because climate is going to affect dam safety and dam operations, as you well know from discussions about projects that you're considering. So Yuba Water Agency advanced this concept in the context of the Association of California Water Agencies and the California Municipal Utilities Association. And we were actually the driving force in building the pretty impressive coalition that you see reflected here with all the logos here. Everyone from various entities in the San Diego area to Santa Clara Valley, also Safeca, Irvine Ranch, and others. So that coalition, we've been just sort of grinding away at trying to get traction on the idea of a state program, funding program focused for this purpose. So after all that grinding away, we're hopeful that 2022 budget may provide opportunity for the coalition to kind of make a breakthrough here, fingers crossed. So we have worked, Adam has worked extremely hard in recent months to develop fact sheets and draft language to establish such a program. We will continue to work with our associations, and whereas we were experiencing a little lull in feeling that this was going to take root, I will say that Adam and I were on a call along with a lot of folks in the water world, where a very key staffer on the Senate side broached this issue as one that's important, and one not just generically, but also important to the state pro tem Senate leaders district. So we will continue to update you on this as need be, but there is cause for optimism, particularly since as we look into this next budget year, as you may have read, the governor is predicting another bounty of surplus, potentially the tune of about $30 billion, if not more, for the state as a whole. So we will be working with the associations as they craft their water packages for this year to embrace this and other items that are of interest to you. Generally speaking, just wanted to throw up here a few issue areas that you will probably recall that we watch like hawks, basically. And there are others, but these are some of the top priority issues that we watch for, either opportunities or threats. Clean energy / SB 100 implementation. As you may recall, SB 100 is the bill that was put in place, I want to say 3 years ago, to put the state on a pathway to zero carbon energy by 2045. So that bill was silent on a couple of energy sources, including hydroelectricity. So we continue to watch both on the implementation side and also on the legislative side for anything that might put a damper on the enthusiasm of hydroelectricity in the zero carbon world. There have been, a couple of little things that have popped up where it was mostly a lack of clarity, I think, but these are things we need to hop on so that bad notions don't take root. Of course, water rights, we always want to keep our eyes open in that regard. There are some rumblings that there could be some kind of legislative activity on this front, kind of ill-defined at this point, but clearly something we want to watch out closely for. Of course, ag water use / conservation. There's this issue that pops up periodically with various levels of intensity. Clearly with the drought, there will be various policy efforts, particularly if it continues to persist or worsen. And then the sort of perennial bad penny notion of water taxes or fees, which have cropped up and I assume will in the future. This is more of an FYI slide for you, not specifically pertinent to the mission of Yuba County. But these are some things that kind of suck up the air in the overall water world and water community. One of those being the current and ongoing implementation efforts surrounding about $1 billion in state funding in this last budget to address customer bill arrearages for both water and sewer. So you'll recall that there was a moratorium that the governor put in place that water and sewer service could not be shut off for folks who fall behind in their bills. Well, as a result, a lot of people fell behind in their bills. So there's hundreds of millions, probably well over $1 billion of these customer arrearages. The state is currently working to implement a program to allow customers to receive some relief. Actually, I think the application process begins December 6th, or the deadline is December 6th. So that's taking up a lot of effort from the water community. Also, FYI, AB 1434 by Assemblywoman Friedman. This has to do with urban water use requirements and study. And that is basically how much water can you use per day inside your home? How much can you use to irrigate your yard? This was a pretty contentious issue last year because the author was leaping ahead of a DWR study that was supposed to occur per a prior agreement. Big, contentious, gnarly fight. The bill got put on ice for a while. It's probably going to be back next year, so that'll be fun. And then SB 222 by Senator Dodd. This looks to set up a low-income rate assistance program that the state would use to allow for low-income residents to get some forgiveness or assistance with their water bills. There's no money attached to this bill yet. It's kind of a, if you build it, they will fund sort of a process with the funding source still being an open question, and with Aqua admirably pressing the issue at all appropriate moments. Hey, this isn't going to be set up for a water tax, right? But someday it could. So those are just some overall things, like I said, taking up energy in the water world. In terms of the capital operations next year, there are kind of some open questions as to how it's going to function. both on two levels. One is just the construction project that's going on to absolutely revamp the 60s era funky annex that's sort of tacked on to the historical part of the Capitol. So what this will mean is, as this tweet from the Capitol State Building account notes, the Assembly and the Senate will still continue to use the chambers for the operations, but this access to the staff and the members' offices will be in a temporary building. This is going to be a really interesting set of logistics to both observe and function in. And then you layer on top of that still the open question of, okay, how are we dealing with COVID now? The Capitol has been technically open for a stretch of time, but participation by the public has been heavily discouraged. And so there's been a huge reliance on call-in for testimony. So whether the Capitol will sort of fully throw their doors open with welcoming arms, or whether or not there will still be this, hey, you can come in, but we're going to limit numbers and really don't do it. Or if there's going to be some sort of hybrid. I think we're all still waiting for exactly how things are going to operate once the legislature returns in January. I can say it has been a true challenge to lobby via Zoom and via email. And you pretty quickly figure out which staffers just kind of conveniently don't notice your emails. You can't conduct your usual lobbying tactics of let me email, let me call, now let me go physically stalk them. So hopefully I can be back to that sort of approach this year with them opening up, fingers crossed. So that's what I have, and I'll let you guys move on.
Any comments from the board?
Through the chair, I just want to say, Pilar, you've been just doing amazing work, and having worked with you now for years, I just want to say thank you, because you really do spectacular work, and I'm down there a lot and see you working with the people that you need to work with, and they really respect you, and I just want to say thanks for all your hard work. It makes a big difference at the agency.
Well, I truly appreciate that, and I'm so grateful to represent the agency. I'm also grateful to work with this guy. You guys could not have done it better.
I agree with that too.
Any further comments from the board? Oh.
With that, we're next going to hear from Jeff Bowman, who's the agency's representative in Washington. I'm just going to be here playing Vanna White, pressing the button, advancing his slides. So don't mind me. And if we unmute Jeff.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me okay today. I appreciate the opportunity to join you virtually. Really quickly, I want to give you an introduction to Van Scoyoc Associates. My boss, Stu Van Scoyoc, founded the firm 30 years ago. He had 3 staff, 8 clients, and a 10-pound cell phone. Today, the firm has grown to anywhere between 180 to 200 clients. We have 55 staff, and we have extensive experience in infrastructure policy. In terms of myself, I've been with Van Scoyoc Associates since July of 2017. Prior to coming to VSA, I worked on Capitol Hill on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. My last several years, I was the staff director at the Subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment. So I had responsibility and sort of the role of being the architect of many of the Water Resources Development Acts from 2007 until 2016. Currently, I represent flood control districts, municipal water districts, and inland and coastal seaports as part of my portfolio. I would just like to say that someone once calculated that there are 15,000 lobbyists and more than 3,500 firms nationwide that do this type of work. So it is a highly competitive field. So I just want to thank you all for choosing us as being your DC representation. So the next slide, view from Capitol Hill right now. This is a very challenging legislative environment. I'd like you guys to keep two numbers in mind, the number 4 and the number 0. The number 0 is important because that is the margin between the Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. There's 50 Republicans, 50 Democrats. Any tie-breaking vote will be placed by Vice President Kamala Harris to bring it to 51 to 50. So it is very tight in the Senate. In the House, the number is 4. the speaker has a 4-seat swing. There's 221 Democrats, 213 Republicans. So on any given vote, if everyone shows up, the speaker can afford to lose 3 votes. But if she loses a 4th, with everybody present, she loses the vote on the bill. The next critical date that everybody should have circled and started on their calendar is December the 3rd. 2 very important benchmarks will be hit that day. First, the federal government will run out of funding in terms of the amount that it can put on the nation's credit card. The debt limit will need to be adjusted on that date. And then secondly, the fiscal year 2022 funding for the federal agencies will also expire. They're right now operating under what's called a continuing resolution that does expire on the 3rd of December. So they're going to need to do something on the 3rd to get them into the next fiscal year. I think what will happen is they'll do a temporary continuing resolution, another one probably go to December the 17th. That probably won't be enough time to complete the work. And my guess is they will then do another short-term continuing resolution into either January or February of next year. The other piece of important work that needs to be finished is the $1.75 trillion Build Back Better initiative. This is what I call the social infrastructure package. This is important priorities to the administration and the House and Senate majorities related to the expansion of pre-kindergarten education, the expansion of Medicare, child care expansion, funding for climate change, access to higher education, paid family and medical leave, modifications to immigration policy, and these items being paid for by modifications to corporate tax rates and modifications to the tax rates on high-income households. The last piece that needs to be enacted before the end of the year is the Defense Authorization Bill. That provides for defense of the homeland. So Congress has a full plate. They did come back into session yesterday for this week. They will not be in session next week because of the holiday. So the week of December the 3rd is going to be a very critical week for the nation and for the government as a whole. The one important thing that I'd like to kind of draw everybody's attention to as we kind of dive into this a little bit more is there's a very important legislative achievement that impacts the Yuba Water Agency, and that is what we call the IIJA. On the next slide, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as of yesterday, that is now the law of the land. President Biden signed it. The legislation is a $1.2 trillion level of investment, what I call sort of a once-in-a-generation opportunity. The last time we saw funding to this extent for infrastructure in general was the 2009 Recovery Act. But what this legislation has, you see a lot of reports. The numbers float between 550 billion and 1.2 trillion. I use the $1.2 trillion figure. The 550 billion, that's what we call new funding. And so included in that new funding are things to improve the deteriorating condition of a lot of our infrastructure. Like, there's 110 billion for roads and bridges within that 550 billion in new spending. There's 66 billion for rail, 39 billion for public transit. Somebody mentioned earlier 65 billion for connecting Americans to high-speed internet or broadband internet access. There's another 65 billion will go to the nation's power grid, and then 55 billion will be spent on wastewater and drinking water systems. One of the things that we are targeting in the immediacy is there is a $17 billion marker for the Army Corps of Engineers and some of their activities. Included in that 17 billion is 75 million for investigations to determine the feasibility for new projects. There will be a 60-day shot clock for the Corps of Engineers to develop what's called a spend plan. That's what we're working on in the immediacy. I'm going to get onto this in the next slide. So the Corps has a very condensed timeline that they are working with. Some of the other agencies, I mentioned the EPA drinking water and wastewater programs. Those have a little bit more of an extended lifespan. For the EPA water programs, those will be extended from fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 26. There are some salmon recovery funds for the National Marine Fisheries Service, 172 million. That'll go through 2027. So that'll pencil out to about $34 million annually for salmon recovery. For wildfire, and there's a lot of components in the bill for wildfire, for prediction capability, fuels reduction, mitigation risk reduction projects. There's in new spending, there's an additional $3.4 billion for the United States Forest Service from fiscal year 22 through 26. There's an entirely new title on wildfire mitigation. So these are some of the things we're tracking. I think some of these, like with the Corps, the money's going to come out quickly. Some of the other agencies, you'll see it in individual fiscal years, and the others, I think for some of these discretionary grant programs, it's going to take several months. And by several months, probably 5, 6, 7 months to get these programs implemented and then the funds out the door. So on the next slide for my presentation, I want to talk a little bit about the atmospheric river control spillway. Corps of Engineers has a very important role in the planning and construction of the nation's water resources development projects. That includes flood control projects, navigation projects, and aquatic ecosystem restoration projects. Now, in our typical cycle, we would have to pursue, in addition to pursuing the funding for the initiation of a study for something like the Arc Spillway, we'd also at the same time would have to get what's called a new start. New starts are limited in the annual fiscal year appropriations process to about 6 annually. That's nationwide. But because we're working in the IIJA world, under IIJA, there's no limitation on the number of new starts they can execute at the beginning of this year. So, the Yuba Water Agency has a proposal at New Bullards Bar and Dam to reduce the flood risk to Yuba County residents by more effectively evacuating water prior to major storm events. So we are working with the Corps of Engineers, the Assistant Secretary of the Army's office to obtain a small component of that $75 million to initiate the study at New Bullards Bar Dam. Again, we're working within a 60-day shot clock that started yesterday. So we've had meetings so far with our entire congressional delegation, with Senator Feinstein's office, Senator Padilla's office, and Congressman Garamendi's office. We're going to need to circle back with these offices because our conversations took place with those offices back in September and October. So we need to have another kind of refresher meeting. We've met with the Corps of Engineers, the headquarters personnel, as well as the Pentagon personnel. And so the idea being that we're going to get the delegation to weigh in with the administration, the Corps of Engineers, to promote this as part of IIJA. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to any questions that you may have for me.
Ward?
Through the chair. Jeff, one quick question for you. Is there anything that we can do as a board to support some of your efforts? I know that we attend as many conferences and meetings wherever we can across the board. So if there's any piece of that puzzle that we can connect, please ask. I suspect I can speak for most anybody on this board that we're here to help wherever we can without also creating any problems where work needs to really be done. But I really appreciate your work and where you sit and the opportunities that come in front of you and the water agent at this point. So thank you for what you do, and we're here to help you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I anticipate we'll be leveraging your assets very soon on that. And right now, because of the pandemic, Washington, D.C. is still largely closed. It is very difficult to get into the Capitol complex. It is even more difficult to obtain face-to-face meetings with agency personnel. I think this will get a little more flexible as we get a little deeper into 2022. So at the appropriate time, I think we should probably have a conversation about a DC advocacy trip, maybe as early as the spring, but definitely want to have that conversation because there's only, as your representative in DC, I can access offices, I can have conversations, but you guys really at your level, you guys are the best salesmen. You know these projects, you know these programs better than I do, and there's no better sales force for me than you guys. So thank you.
Through the chair. Yeah, I just want to first I'll congratulate Willie for such a great hire and hiring Adam. I love Rich Golb and had a relationship with him for a long time. But I look at the $1.1 trillion that just came down in infrastructure, and I'm so proud of the fact that I think we have the best team ever put together for the agency to go after all the money that's there. It's just incredible to see. And Adam, I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm confident that you're going to knock it out of the park. And I am so happy that it is this time when we have the best team ever to go after the trillions of dollars there. And I think we're better prepared than almost anybody else in the country to go after it. So thank you for putting the team together. And thank you. I'm looking forward. And like Randy said, any way, any place that we can help, that I can help, certainly let us know. So thanks.
Any further comment from the board?
Yes, I'm concerned that the 60-day window, and you just talked about the capital is primarily shut down. What can we do with our local congressman, not just Garamendi, but also think of LaMatha, to try to make sure you be able to act within this 60-day window?
Yeah, thank you. So we're working on that. We've got to circle back with your congressman to make sure that Congressman Garamendi's comfortable with with the role that we've mapped out for him. I think it would behoove me to reach out to Congressman LaMalfa's staff as well as Congressman McClintock's staff to kind of get an understanding of where they are in their process. They were members that did not vote in favor of IIJA. And so there's a bit of a peculiar issue that I'd like to explore with them. I don't know to what extent they're going to be able to weigh in on this due to the like I said, the peculiarity of their no vote on IIJA. So I'll keep Adam and the team informed of those conversations.
Thank you.
All right.
Director.
Go ahead. If the government would just recognize the fact that hydroelectric power is green, I think that if they took a look at Yuba County, they'd find out that we have one of the smallest carbon footprints probably in the United States as a county. I think it would be nice to make hydroelectric power that we have green, rather than, it's more dependable than solar, last check. So anyhow.
Chair Vasquez, just a few more slides here if we might, and I think we'll get to exactly the point you just raised here, because it's kind of something we bump up against in the state capitol in particular quite a bit. As we head into 2022, we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're prepared to both pursue the opportunities that we've already talked about at some length this morning, as well as identify those concerns and risks that run to exactly the point you just raised. And then finally, think about how we can continue to communicate how our work locally relates to priorities, not only regionally, but in many cases statewide and even nationally. So just a few things to, I guess, reemphasize. I won't go into detail, but both the state budget and the infrastructure investments that are being made at the federal level provide really unique opportunities for the agency across all of the work that we do, not only for things like flood risk reduction, which we've already talked about, and the work related to forest health and watershed resilience, but economic development. There's significant funding being made available for wastewater and drinking water infrastructure projects. We've talked a little bit about broadband already. There's 3,000 pages to the bill that was signed yesterday, but we're already working our way through it to make sure that we're identifying the relevant opportunities. As Jeff Bowman described, we've been working for months to set ourselves up to successfully pursue the opportunity associated with the Army Corps of Engineers funding. That's part of the bill that was signed yesterday. Additionally, at the state level, as Pilar described, there are opportunities through both existing programs that we're seeing funding added to, as well as new programs that we're working with partners around the state to make the value for investments in things like the ARC spillway at New Bullards Bar Dam and similar projects across the state that are really updating existing infrastructure to make sure that it can provide all of the intended values as we move into the future. We've talked a lot about money today, but I think it's always worth keeping in mind that there are opportunities related to policy as well. And one brief example I want to highlight is AB 697, which was authored by Mr. Chow from Los Angeles. This is a bill that expands the state's ability to utilize what's called the Good Neighbor Authority utilizing state funding and resources to do work on federal lands, specifically Forest Service lands. That's an important part of the work that we're doing through the North Yuba Forest Partnership. And what's exciting to us as advocates is when we can relate work that matters to Yuba Water Agency, ensuring our forests and our headwaters are healthy, to policy priorities for a legislator from Los Angeles. It's finding that common interest, which I think is really unique. And then finally, thankfully last year, we didn't see a whole lot of threats in the policy world. Pilar talked about some of the other issues that have consumed a lot of attention for water agencies generally. None of those really immediately implicated Yuba Water Agency's interests, but we're really going to be attuned to any potential risks as we head into next year. Pilar also mentioned a bill related to SB 100 implementation. Chair Vasquez, to your point, this bill, and it was a matter of clarification, would have exempted public agencies that own large hydro facilities from the state's framework for zero carbon energy as we move toward 2045. That would have dramatic impacts on Yuba Water Agency if it wasn't addressed, but thankfully we were able to identify the issue early, work with the author staff to address the issue, and while the bill didn't ultimately become law, we were able to put a pin in that issue, establish a relationship with that member staff, and we're prepared to engage on issues like that moving forward. Finally, and I've already alluded to this, the work that we're doing here in Yuba Water Agency matters. It matters to the people of Yuba County. But in so many cases, whether it's the headwaters, flood risk reduction, or our contributions to water supply reliability statewide, it's work that resonates regionally, at the statewide level, and even nationally. So anytime that we can make the work, our priorities, our mission and responsibilities to the people of Yuba County resonate with audiences more broadly, that's in our strategic interest, and it's something we'll look to do every time. And that's where the close work that we do with our communication staff is so important. Just briefly here, looking toward the political landscape of 2022, it's already been touched on a few times, but we're going to have a lot of folks on the ballot in 2022, starting with Governor Newsom and going on through the full list of statewide elected officials you see here. Somewhat unique in this election, 3 of those officials are actually folks who were appointed by Governor Newsom directly. So sort of interesting dynamic there. There are also a number of ballot initiatives that are working their way toward qualification for the November 2022 ballot. One that the board might be hearing more about in the future is the More Water Now initiative. This is a bill that would seek, or excuse me, an initiative that would seek to impose a Prop 98 type formula on the state's general fund, where 2% would be set aside for water development projects until certain, basically, amounts of additional water storage were realized. While that and every other initiative has a long road to go before it actually appears on the ballot, I think the threshold is something like just under 1 million signatures this year. There's now a process whereby the legislature can negotiate with ballot initiative proponents to pull something off the ballot. So that and other ballot initiatives really have the potential to kind of reshape the legislative agenda as we head into next year. And then finally, and last, certainly not least, term limits. Starting in 2022, we're going to see the first set of turnover under the new formula for term limits adopted by California voters through Prop 28 back in 2012. You may recall this extends basically term limits to 12 years between the various houses. Here locally, we're going to see some significant turnover. State Senator Jim Nielsen, who served the region for many, many years, will be term limited in 2022. As we look to 2024, we're going to see this ripple across the state with, for example, both the Speaker of the State Assembly and the State Senate President Pro Tem being term limited out in 2024. Folks are already thinking closely about this. And finally, this is my last slide, redistricting. We've obviously already talked a little bit about redistricting as it affects the agency here today, but both our congressional and our state legislative delegation district maps will be changed. The rendering that we see on the screen here is the proposed draft congressional map that was put out by the California Citizens Redistricting Commission on November 10th. They're going to be working to finalize these maps between now and the end of the year. But just a few observations for the groups, for the board's potential interest. The congressional map actually splits Yuba County into 2 separate congressional districts, which is really unprecedented. We go from being sort of the eastern edge of the 3rd congressional district to being at the southern tip of 2 separate congressional districts. That's a significant change. We see similar changes to our proposed state legislative district maps, where we go from basically being in Sacramento Valley districts on both the Senate side and the Assembly side to more foothill and Sierra-oriented districts. So significant changes are possible there. While nothing's done until it's done, and the commission has not yet finalized these maps, as we head into 2022 and the next election, we'll be looking at potentially varied district maps. So with that, as I said, again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you today with your advocates. We're we are very pleased to have the opportunity to talk about the work that we've been doing and some of the things we see on the horizon. Certainly available for any thoughts and questions now or in the future, but just thank you for the opportunity to be with you today and share some of these updates.
Through the chair. So Adam, I really appreciate you being the quarterback on this whole thing. Again, with NACO, thanks for supporting our rep that came and you took control of that. Great job, great feedback. So I'm looking forward to maybe you being more active in the NACO area. And I think it's worth your time and energy to work that angle a bit. And again, from your perspective, if this board can support you, please ask. We're part of this team, and wherever we can fill in and work in your direction, all rowing in the same direction, I think it's valuable for all of us. So please feel free to make that contact. I think it's worthwhile, and I think you're doing a great job.
Okay. Update on the power sales settlements function. And I think that
would be Maury. Maury, are you on?
Yep, I'm here.
Excellent.
Maury, you can share your screen if you're ready.
Oh, all right. My apologies here.
That's all right. I can do it from here if you prefer.
Yeah, go ahead. I was thinking that's what you were going to do, so.
doesn't want his picture up there.
Great, thank you. This is a similar presentation that we gave to the board back in February, March earlier this year. Go ahead, next slide. The intent here was a refresher for continuing board members and to introduce the powers staff to the new board members and to the existing, if you're not familiar. Go ahead to the next one. We have Andy Richards. She's our power settlements analyst, and then myself. I've been the operations manager and moving over and doing energy sales and contracts management for the last couple of months. Go ahead, next slide. So again, like I said, this was kind of a recap, but just give you a quick recap of where we've come since 2016. The water agencies had operated for 50 years with a PG&E power purchase contract and expired in April of 2016. That contract with PG&E allowed the agency to use the PG&E funding to pay off all the bond debt. And in 2016, when the agency took over and PG&E dropped out, we had the project all paid for. So in that respect, it was a great thing. In anticipation of the transfer where we took over of the wholesale generator, we did construct a 24/7 control room. We hired the necessary operating staff, compliance, engineering, and contract managers, and brought that all in-house to perform our own functions. Beginning in May 1st, like I said, Yuba began selling energy into the California ISO. We refer to it usually as CAISO. From inception through December 2020, we've earned $292 million in energy and ancillary services for the agency. Go ahead, next slide. So in addition to power sales to CAISO, Yuba also participates in selling what's called RA, resource adequacy, and we sell carbon-free energy via bilateral markets. So these are entities out there that are looking to specifically buy those energy products. So in addition to what we've earned from CAISO, we've also earned $69.1 million in resource adequacy and carbon-free sales. Yuba does use Shell Energy as our scheduling coordinator, just as a point of reference there for you. Go ahead, next slide. So one of the points, reasons for coming before the board here was we do periodically update our energy risk management policy. So that's one of the things we've been working on for the last couple of months. So there are a couple of edits that we've made to the policy, but just to recap what the policy is, the policy outlines the rules that we use to sell our hydro generation products and is approved by the Yuba Board of Directors. The energy risk management policy is made up of Yuba staff members from various departments, and we have 2 third-party consultants that have expertise in hydrology and energy market as participants in that committee. The committee members meet regularly to identify risks and determine mitigating measures, and then make sure that we do comply with the policy overall. And just again, as a recap, the primary risks for Yuba include hydrology fluctuations, which obviously we have no control over. Market price fluctuations, again, we have no control over those. Operational performance, that's when we do have control over, and we do a really good job internally of managing our resources and directing those towards unit maintenance and making sure that our units do stay highly available. Regulatory proceedings and legislative changes, those things we don't have control over. As you just heard from the last couple of presentations, we do and can influence those. But all of these can highly impact our sales revenue from year to year. I'm going to pass this over to Andy. She's going to talk to a couple things that she does and open up if you have any questions. And again, one of the primary goals here was to get your approval for the edits to the energy risk management policy. And if you have any questions on those, and that was all included in your packet there. Go ahead, Andy.
Good morning. As Moore mentioned, my name is Andy Richmond. I'm the Power Settlements Analyst. Jim, if you can go to the next slide, please. One more.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just talk really briefly about the different markets we participate in through the CAISO. CAISO has 3 main markets: their day-ahead market, the 15-minute, and the real-time. The day-ahead market gives us our schedule for the next day. We have a theory that is the day-ahead stays in the day-ahead. Every day we submit bids, or Shell submits bids for us by 10 a.m. and then at 1 p.m. we are given our schedule for the next day, which gives us the bulk of our revenue. We also have the ability to schedule in the 15-minute and real-time market, mainly for real-time fluctuations to make sure there's enough power on the grid to handle demand, because you can't have excess supply on the lines at any time, which is the function of the real-time market. There are also 4 different ancillary service products that we provide, mainly reg up and reg down, which are used in the real-time market to make those real-time adjustments to make sure there's enough power on the grid. There's also spinning and non-spinning. Those are used mostly in emergencies when there's not enough power on the grid, and those are at much lower prices than reg up and reg down. Next slide, Jim. So the settlements process. This is the bulk.
That's on her and Andy. I think you disconnected. Maury, can you help?
Yeah, it looks like Andy froze up there.
Can you hear me now?
You're back. There you go.
There we go. Oh, internet connection's unstable. Cool. Okay, I'll make this quick. So every week we are sent a CAISO invoice, tells us how much money we earned in a certain period of time and any adjustments that are made based on price fluctuations or changes in the software. My job is to go through that, validate all the information. If there are any inconsistencies or times when we are charged the wrong amount or charged too much, we go through and I submit city tickets, which are customer interface dispute something. Can't remember at the moment. Shell submits those for us on our behalf, and CAISO goes through and validates that information. And for the most part, we are pretty successful. I think we have a 95% success rate with that. That's pretty much all I have. And any questions from the board?
I would like, being a person that likes numbers, I've tried to learn as much as I could about CalISO and the settlements. And I would like to compliment Willie and his staff for coming up with some, I don't want to call them ingenious, but common sense decisions that can make us a lot of extra money. And I think it behooves all of us to learn a little bit about these mechanisms. Not that we can tell Willie and his staff what to do, but at least we can understand what the staff does in our behalf.
I respond to Charlie. Charlie, first off, thanks for the compliments. Secondly, this is a generalized dive into what we do in settlements. If any of the board members want a more detailed dive into it, maybe Don or Seth. I know we've talked about energy sales a little bit, but if you want more detailed dive into it, I'm happy to do it anytime. I will say this, Charlie. Yes, we have kind of changed our bidding strategy over the last couple of years, and we've gotten more sophisticated in what we do. And I want to say it this way. I think you pushed us to get there faster than we would have gotten there. So we appreciate the questions you asked, and you didn't come to us with solutions or telling us how to do it, but you came to us with questions that we had to answer by getting better at what we were doing.
Through the chair. So what you've accomplished in the last 5 years, tremendous. I think back at that point, there was a lot of work to be done internally, and staff has done a tremendous job in staying on top of this. Great job. I'll make the motion to approve any adoption on this policy.
Second.
Just real quick, Maury, were we finished with the slides? Oh, very good. Thank you. I want to make sure we got through them all.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Let's start with Director Fletcher. Director Fuhrer. The modifications to the ERM policy. Yeah, that's a necessary. Okay, thank you. Director Blazer. Director Hasty.
Yes.
Director Bradford.
Yes.
Director Vasquez.
Yes.
And Director Matthews.
Yes.
Thank you. Passes
Gotta work
7-0.
these switches. Okay. All right. Item 11, board chair seeks to create an ad hoc committee and appoint 3 directors to review and recommend a 3-party agreement on accord transfers with East Bay Municipal District and Contra Costa Water District. All right. I've had a discussion with some of the members of the board. We have 3 volunteers. Brent Hasty, Charlie Matthews, and myself. Is there any comments from the board as to the makeup of the ad hoc committee? Any questions? Good deed goes unpunished. Okay, so we'll create that ad hoc committee with those 3 directors and recommend a 3-party agreement on accord transfers. Okay. When do we get information on this?
So Jim will work with you to set up a meeting, and we'll get you some draft documents prior to that meeting.
Okay.
Through the chair, do we need a motion for that?
We thought we did.
No, your board rules provide subject to board approval, so hearing no objection, the chairman can create the committee, and it's the board's opportunity to speak now or forever hold the peace.
Okay.
Oh, that's tough.
All right. Manager's report. You're up, Billy.
Okay, well, I reported 2 weeks ago that we had that big storm and Bullards came up 55,000 acre feet. So we're doing decent. Like I said, it wasn't a drought buster, but it certainly helped. We have a minor storm forecast for this weekend. I talked to John James this morning. It doesn't look like it's going to be anything significant. And we have kind of high pressured, kind of dry conditions in the 10-day forecast. So things aren't looking great at this point, but it is only the middle of November. I'm not going to cover my normal revenue stuff because Maury just went over that. So this is going to be a fairly short update. The Colgate Unit 2 outage is scheduled to start on December 1st. And we closed escrow on the 2 of the 3 property transactions we've been working on, the Blue Point Mine, Rogers Tyner property, and on the Chuck Siller property where we're going to build the admin building and warehouse. We recently, since the last board meeting, have closed escrows on those transactions. And let's see, our second operator trainee, Cooper Hale, started yesterday at Colgate, and our new working foreman, Mike Roush, will start on November 30th. And the recruitment process is underway for the Director of Water Resources and Flood Risk Reduction, as well as the Human Resources Manager. We're hosting our next virtual Lunch and Learn webinar, Preparing for the Next Big Flood, Past, Present, and Future Investments in Flood Risk Reduction, tomorrow at noon, and you can sign up to attend on our website. For those unable to tune in live, a recording will be available after the event. A November 2nd press release on $1.4 million in community impact grants and loans approved by the board was positively covered by the Appeal Democrat, Territorial Dispatch, local radio stations, and on social media. Yuba-Water also recently shared a visual story update on the Hallwood Side Channel and Floodplain Restoration Project, which included photos and video of fish already using the restored habitat. The visual story was featured in last week's Aqua e-News, Aqua's November member newsletter, and positively shared on social media. And lastly, Yuba-Water is sponsoring the Marysville and Olivehurst Christmas parades and the So You Can holiday food and gift deliveries. Our next meetings is a regular Board of Directors meeting, an ABP meeting, and a Policy Review Committee meeting on December 7th, and a special Board of Directors meeting on December 15th.
All right, board member reports. Charlie?
One of the criterias that we're judged by is the salmon in the river. And it's my understanding from Willie that part of the thing is how many juveniles we produce to the Delta each year. And I guess, and I've talked with Willie about it, the one that the public would have a better understanding is the amount of returns. And I would hope that in the future we can encourage the staff to focus on return, since that's a number the public understands. And the reason we want the public to understand, when you look at the rivers in the Kern area, they took rivers that hadn't had water in them for 50 years, took the water away from the agencies and put it for returning salmon. And had they had a program that had returned salmon some other way, they might have come to a better conclusion. So when you look at our risk, it's always salmon, and salmon returns might be a better metric for us to look for in the future. Thank you.
Just a couple of things. It was a really nice public gesture to donate the equipment to Say Love. I think that was really nice. Secondly, on Ellis Lake, there was the Water Lantern Festival there over the weekend. I don't know if anybody else attended that, but it really, you know, demonstrates the potential use of that lake for future events. There must have been, hard to estimate, I'd say 500 people, maybe. Went on from 3 to 9, I think. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they set the water lanterns out. Fortunately, most of it was in the evening, so you couldn't see the quality of the water. But it was really nice example of what can be done out there.
Seth, anything? No? Brett?
Yeah, a couple things. One, coming up in the next month, a first in-person Aqua conference in a while. So I hope to see you down in Pasadena. It'll be a good conference. It'll be a little smaller than you're used to. We expect between 700 and 900. Normally Aqua's about 1,600. You can also do it online if you found that you prefer online, but I think you'll enjoy Pasadena. I hope you can make it. We will be electing the new vice president, and it also means it's my last official off the executive committee board. It's the last thing I have to do. Trust me, it's the best thing I've had to do during my aqua career. I also wanted to ask staff to report back, because I know I've been pushing Terry and Willie for a while, but I haven't seen a charger for an electric car on any of our sites. And I really do think that to set the example that we're trying to set, that we probably ought to feel how to figure that out. And it's been a few years and we're still don't have a site with one of those. So I'd like to see how that works. And I know that I've told Terry, and, as we're going into the new world, as we're starting to buy new rigs, maybe we should, that new Ford Lightning would be perfect for a lot of the stuff we do, but look at some electric rigs. So in that case, we do that, we might need chargers, so it might be valuable to do. And lastly, I just want to thank the team and the entire board for the work that you allowed the agency to do. We really are a world-class organization, leading the state of California, and as you heard today, much in the nation, and have a wonderful and a time of great Thanksgiving, because we have so much to be thankful for. So thanks.
Gary?
Nothing to say after that.
So there is billions of dollars in the fund that was signed yesterday. Let's see what the federal government would like to support us locally. I might think there's money there that maybe they'd like to put in Yuba counties.
Well, I don't think we'll live that long, Randy, but
I plan on it. So
yeah, this has been a long meeting, so I'm going to keep it short. Nothing. All right. Dick? Jerry? Jim? Okay. Well, this meeting is adjourned. Yeah.
Show you how. Live streaming can be simple and not expensive. You may already have the basic tools right in your hand, but it's more than just pushing live to communicate effectively. That's where Yuba-Sutter.live and Live Streaming YS on Facebook can help you. Make it easy to jump in. Just give us a call at 530-301-2931 or visit our website, www.yuba-sutter.live. Yuba-Sutter's home of live streaming and live streaming tools, live streaming services, technology, and training. Live streaming is Yuba-Sutter.live.